When I bought my small farm in the countryside, I thought I had finally found my peaceful retreat. No noisy neighbors, no HOA nonsense, just me, my land, and my trusty tractor, which I used daily to maintain my fields. But I had no idea that trouble would find me in the form of Karen, the self-proclaimed queen of the nearest town. The first time I met her, she acted overly friendly, flashing that too wide smile that screamed fake politeness. I should have known then that she was going to be a problem. The real trouble started when she demanded I move my tractor from her neighborhood's view. I laughed it off, thinking it was just a weird encounter. But I was dead wrong, because a few days later, Karen tried to have my tractor towed and from my own land. And that's when I decided I was going to teach her a lesson she'd never forget. A few days after our first encounter, I was in my barn doing some maintenance on my trusty old tractor. It wasn't fancy, but it got the job done. The last thing I expected was to hear angry footsteps crunching over my gravel driveway. I turned around and, sure enough, there was Karen, standing there with her arms crossed and her signature disapproving scowl. "You really should move that thing," she sniffed, pointing at my tractor. "It's an eyesore. The people in my neighborhood don't want to look at that." I raised an eyebrow. Her neighborhood was half a mile away. There was no way they could even see my tractor from there. "Well, that's funny," I said, trying not to laugh, "because I don't recall asking for anyone's opinion." Karen huffed, clearly not expecting me to push back. "Look, I'm just trying to be a good neighbor," she said in that sugary sweet tone that only fake people use. "And I know a great towing service that can take that thing off your hands. It's probably a safety hazard anyway." I took a step closer, making sure she knew I wasn't backing down. "Karen, let me make this very clear," I said. "This is my property. This is my tractor. And no one, not you, not your HOA friends, has any say over what I do here." Her expression darkened for a moment before she forced another tight-lipped smile. "Suit yourself," she said. "But don't be surprised if people take action." With that, she turned on her heel and stormed off. I shook my head and went back to work, not taking her words seriously. But I should have, because the next morning, when I walked outside, I found something unbelievable. Our tow truck was in my driveway, and it was hooking up to my tractor. I stood there, frozen in disbelief, watching as a tow truck driver attached a chain to my tractor's front axle. "Hey, what the hell do you think you're doing?" I shouted, storming down my driveway. The guy barely glanced at me. He was acting like this was a normal job. "I got a work order to tow this vehicle," he said with a shrug. "A work order? From who?" I demanded. And that's when I heard her voice. "That would be me," Karen chirped, stepping out from the side of my barn. She was standing there like she owned the place, arms folded, smirking like she had already won. "You refused to move it, so I took care of it for you," she said. "You should really thank me. This thing is a total nuisance." I let out a short, bitter laugh. "Karen, you have officially lost your mind," I said. "This is my farm, and that tractor is my property. You have no authority here." The tow truck driver looked between us, suddenly realizing he might have made a mistake. "Wait, this isn't community property?" he asked, scratching his head. "Of course it's not," I snapped. "First, did you even check the paperwork?" Karen's smug smile faltered for just a second before she straightened up and waved a dismissive hand. "Oh, come on," she scoffed. "It's just sitting there collecting rust. It's an environmental hazard. I was doing you a favor." I turned to the tow truck driver, who was now looking extremely uncomfortable. "Let me make this easy for you," I said. "If you touch my tractor again, I'll be calling the sheriff. And Karen, if you try anything like this again, I'll be pressing charges for trespassing and attempted theft." The driver immediately unhooked the chain and mumbled an apology before getting the hell out of there. Karen, meanwhile, looked like she had just swallowed a lemon. "Joy, you'll regret this," she hissed before stomping off. I watched her go, shaking my head. I thought that was the end of it, but I was so wrong, because the very next day, Karen came back, and this time, she had a new plan. The next morning, I was sipping my coffee on the porch, still shaking my head over Karen's insanity, when I heard an engine rumbling down my driveway. I set my mug down and squinted toward the road, and that's when I saw it. A police car. My stomach dropped. What now? The deputy stepped out, adjusting his belt as he walked up. I recognized him, Deputy Walker, one of the local guys. Good reputation, fair. "Morning," he said, tipping his hat. "Mind if we talk?" "What's this about?" I asked, though I already had a bad feeling. And then, like clockwork, Karen appeared, marching up behind him like she was the one in charge. "Officer, thank goodness you're here," she cried dramatically. I tried to be civil, but this man is keeping abandoned machinery on his land and it's a danger to the entire community. I nearly spit out my coffee. "Abandoned? That's my damn tractor," I shot back. Karen gasped like I had just slapped her in church. "Thanks, sir," the deputy said, holding up a hand to calm us both. "I just need to confirm ownership. Do you have the title for the vehicle?" Now, normally, this wouldn't have been an issue. I kept all my paperwork in my office, but then I remembered. Karen had been snooping around my property, and suddenly I had a horrifying thought. I rushed inside, my boots thudding against the floorboards as I ran to my desk. I yanked open the drawer where I kept all my documents, property deed, truck registration, but the tractor's title was gone. My stomach twisted as I stared at the empty drawer. This couldn't be happening. I turned on my heel and stormed back outside, where Karen stood with that self-satisfied smirk plastered across her face. "Missing something," she cooed, tilting her head. I clenched my jaw. She had taken it. I didn't know how, but I was sure of it. Deputy Walker frowned. "Sir, if you can't provide proof of ownership, this could be considered abandoned equipment." I exhaled slowly, forcing myself to stay calm. "Deputy, I have the title, or at least I did. It was in my office, and now it's gone." "But I know this woman has been snooping around my property." Karen gasped dramatically, placing a hand over her chest. "How dare you accuse me of something so ridiculous?" she huffed. "I'm just a concerned citizen trying to keep this town looking respectable." I ignored her and turned back to Walker. "Give me an hour," I said. "I'll find that damn title." He hesitated, then nodded. "Fine, but if you can't prove ownership, the county might have to impound it." I didn't have time to waste. I marched back inside and started tearing through every drawer, cabinet, and folder. Nothing. Karen had been on my land multiple times. Could she have taken it during one of her little visits? And then I had an idea. I pulled up my security camera footage. My hands clenched into fists as I fast-forwarded through the last few days. And then, there it was. Karen, sneaking onto my porch at night. She slipped something into her purse. I had her. I grabbed my phone and called Deputy Walker back outside. "You might want to take a look at this," I said, holding up the footage. Karen's face drained of color. Karen froze, her eyes locked on the security footage playing on my phone. "Well, that could be anyone," she stammered, her voice suddenly a lot less confident. I didn't even have to argue. Deputy Walker leaned in, watching the grainy night footage. The timestamp didn't lie. "Ma'am," he said, turning toward her, "mind telling me why you were on his property after dark?" Karen's face turned bright red. She opened her mouth, then closed it, her eyes darting between us like a trapped animal. "I was just checking for safety violations," she blurted. "So, you know, making sure the property was up to code." Even Walker rolled his eyes at that one. "Right," he said, unimpressed. "Let's go ahead and check your bag, ma'am." Karen clutched her purse like it held the secrets of the universe. "I don't have to show you anything," she snapped. "Actually, ma'am," Walker said, crossing his arms, "you're trespassing on private property, and you've been caught on camera. You can either show me what's in the bag now, or we can continue this conversation down at the station." Karen's mouth opened in a silent scream of frustration, but she knew she was cornered. With a loud huff, she yanked open her purse and yanked out a folded piece of paper. I snatched it before she could change her mind, and there it was, my tractor's title. My grip tightened on the paper as I turned back to Walker. "I believe this clears things up," I said, my voice dripping with sarcasm. Walker nodded. "Sure does. And, ma'am, I'm going to need you to come with me for attempted theft and trespassing." Karen's eyes widened in horror. "You can't do this. This is all a big misunderstanding," she screeched, but Walker had already grabbed his radio. But just as I thought it was over, something even crazier happened. Karen pulled one last trick, and it was something I never saw coming. Just when I thought Karen had finally run out of ways to screw with me, she did something I never expected. She collapsed right there in my driveway. Oh no," she gasped, clutching her chest. I can't breathe." I stared at her, unbelieving. Deputy Walker blinked, then let out the biggest sigh I've ever heard in my life. "Ma'am," he said, clearly not buying it, "are you seriously faking a medical emergency right now?" Karen let out a dramatic cough, peeking up at him from the ground. "Call an ambulance," she wheezed. "I have a heart condition. I could die." Now, let me be clear. I don't mess around when it comes to real medical emergencies, but I had seen Karen sprint across my property just fine, not even 5 minutes ago. Deputy Walker wasn't buying it either. "Ma'am, you have two choices," he said flatly. "Either you stand up and come with me, or I'll call an ambulance, and when they find out you're lying, you'll be charged with filing a false report, too." Karen's miraculous recovery was almost instant. She sat up with a huff, glaring daggers at both of us. "This is police harassment," she shrieked. Walker actually chuckled. "Ma'am, you literally stole this man's property documents and tried to have his tractor towed. You should be thanking me for not putting you in cuffs yet." Karen opened her mouth, realized she had nothing to say, then snapped it shut again. I crossed my arms, smirking just a little. "So, Karen," I said, "are you walking to the squad car, or do you need another medical episode to get there?" Her face burned red, and for a moment I thought she'd try one last stunt, but she must have realized she had completely lost. She stormed toward the police car, muttering under her breath. "So you'll regret this," she hissed as she passed me. I leaned against my tractor, grinning. "Oh, I doubt that." But Karen wasn't bluffing, because what she did next, it was worse than anything she'd pulled so far. I thought that watching Karen get hauled off in a police car would be the end of it. I was wrong, because the next morning, I woke up to a letter taped to my front door. It wasn't from the police. It wasn't from Karen. It was from a lawyer. I unfolded the paper, already feeling my blood pressure rise. "Dear Sir," it began, "our client, Miss Karen, last name omitted, has informed us of your continued harassment, public defamation, and deliberate attempts to cause her emotional distress. Effective immediately, you are to cease all contact with our client and remove any defamatory statements you have made regarding her person. Failure to comply may result in further legal action." I laughed out loud. Karen was suing me, after everything she had done. I shook my head and grabbed my phone. This was beyond ridiculous. I called up Deputy Walker, who had already seen the mess Karen had caused. "She's actually trying to sue me," I said, still in disbelief. "This woman has no shame." Walker chuckled. "Yeah, I heard she got out on bail last night. Guess she's trying to flip the script." "Can she actually do this?" I asked. "Not really," he said. "Lawsuits like this rarely hold up, especially since we already have evidence of her breaking the law. But if I were you, I'd get a lawyer just to shut it down properly." And that's exactly what I did. I called up my own attorney, a sharp guy named Dan, who took one look at Karen's claim and laughed so hard he wheezed. "This is what we call a frivolous lawsuit," he said. "It's meant to scare you into backing down. She has no actual case." "So what do we do?" I asked. "Oh, we're not just going to shut this down," Dan said, grinning like a shark. "We're going to make her regret ever sending this letter." And that's when I realized Karen had just made the worst mistake of her life. Karen thought she could scare me into submission with a lawsuit. She had no idea who she was messing with. My lawyer, Dan, wasted no time filing a counterclaim. If Karen wanted to play legal games, we were going to bury her in paperwork. "All right," Dan said, flipping through the documents. "Here's what we're doing. We're not just rejecting her claims. We're suing her for damages, harassment, and legal fees." "Wait, we can do that?" I asked, surprised. Dan smirked. "Oh, absolutely. She filed a bogus lawsuit to intimidate you. That's textbook legal harassment. Plus, we have proof she trespassed, tried to steal your tractor, and filed a false police complaint. She's done." I grinned. Finally, some real payback. Within 24 hours, Dan had a legal response drafted and sent. The next morning, Karen called me. I didn't even know she had my number, but there she was, screeching into the phone. "How dare you countersue me?" she shrieked. "How dare you try to steal my tractor?" I shot back. "I was just trying to make the community look better," she screamed. "Karen," I said, deadpan, "and you live half a mile away. You can't even see my property." There was a long silence. Then she screeched, slammed the phone down, and hung up. I thought that was the end of it. But then, that same afternoon, I got another surprise. I was out in the barn when I heard car tires crunching up my driveway. I turned cheese expecting another police car or maybe Karen herself. Instead, it was a group of people from the HOA. They stepped out of their cars, looking uncomfortable. "Hey," one of them said, we need to talk." I crossed my arms. "Now what?" "It's about Karen," the man continued. We didn't know what she was doing, and now she's trying to use HOA funds to pay for her lawsuit." My eyes widened. "Come again?" I said, grinning. Karen wasn't just in trouble. She was about to go down in flames. I leaned against my tractor, arms crossed, watching the HOA members shift uncomfortably in front of me. "Let me get this straight," I said, trying not to laugh. "Karen is using HOA fund to fight a lawsuit that she started." The guy in the front, a balding man in a cheap polo shirt, sighed. "Yeah, and we just found out about it this morning. We had no idea she was trying to get your land annexed into the HOA either." I raised an eyebrow. "So you're telling me you guys didn't support what she was doing?" He shook his head. "Nope. In fact, a bunch of us are pissed. Karen's been making executive decisions without consulting anyone, and now that there's a lawsuit, she's trying to dip into our maintenance budget to cover her legal fees." I grinned. Karen had officially screwed herself. "So what are you going to do about it?" I asked. The HOA guy sighed again. "We're holding an emergency board meeting tonight, and if what you're saying is true, we might just vote her out." Now that was interesting. "Well," I said, smirking, "I might have some proof to help you make that decision." I pulled out my phone and showed them the security footage. Karen trespassing, stealing my documents, and trying to have my tractor towed. The HOA members watched in horrified silence. "So, oh my God," one of the women muttered. "She actually did that?" "Yep," I said. "And if you don't believe me, Deputy Walker has a whole report on it too." The balding man rubbed his temples, looking more done with life than I'd ever seen. "This is bad," he muttered. "Yeah, this is really, really bad," I shrugged. "Not my problem, but if I were you, I'd take care of it before she takes down your entire HOA with her." He nodded slowly. "We'll handle it." And that's when I knew Karen's days of terrorizing people were officially numbered. That evening, I decided to take a little trip. I wasn't about to miss Karen's downfall. The HOA meeting was being held at their clubhouse, a pretentious little building near the entrance of their neighborhood. When I walked in, I was greeted with glares, nervous glances, and whispers, and then I saw her. Karen was sitting at the front of the room, arms crossed, looking like she had already made up 100 excuses in her head. But the HOA board members, they weren't buying it. "This meeting has been called to discuss an urgent matter." The balding HOA guy, who I now knew was named Ted, said, "It has come to our attention that HOA funds have been misused for personal legal battles." Karen snapped to attention. "That's a lie," she shrieked. Ted sighed. "Karen, we have bank statements. We know you've been funneling HOA money into your lawyer's retainer." I leaned against the wall, smirking. "Oh, and there's also this," I said, holding up my phone. I pressed play on the security footage. Karen trespassing, stealing my documents, and trying to have my tractor towed. The room fell completely silent. Then, chaos. "You stole his paperwork," one woman gasped. "You tried to annex his land," another HOA member shouted. Karen's face drained of color. I was only doing what was best for the community," she stammered. Ted slammed his gavel onto the table. "Karen, you've left us no choice," he said. "Effective immediately, you are removed as HOA president." Karen's mouth dropped open. "You can't do this. I built this hoe," she shrieked. "And you just tore it down," I said, grinning. Then Ted hit her with the final blow. "Furthermore, since HOA funds were misused, we'll be pursuing legal action against you for fraud," Karen screamed. I have never seen someone self-destruct so fast in my life, and just when she thought it couldn't get worse, the police walked in. The room fell deathly silent as the police officers stepped inside. Karen, who had been in full meltdown mode just seconds ago, suddenly froze. "Ma'am," Deputy Walker said, crossing his arms, "we need to have a conversation." Karen sprang to her feet, eyes darting around the room like a cornered animal. This is harassment," she screeched. "I am a respected member of this community." Walker didn't flinch. "Sas, ma'am, we have multiple reports of trespassing, attempted fraud, theft of personal property, and misuse of HOA funds." Karen's face drained of color. "That's ridiculous," she shrieked. "I was only trying to help." Ted, the now former HOA president, stood up and glared at her. "Help," he spat. "Karen, you stole HOA money. You tried to take over someone's private land. You lied to all of us. You almost got our entire HOA sued. You're done." The room erupted with voices. Some HOA members were furious. Others were just embarrassed to have ever sided with her. Karen's breathing got heavier, like she was about to explode. Then she turned to me, pure hatred in her eyes. "You did this to me," she shrieked, pointing at me like a madwoman. I smirked. "No, Karen," I said. "You did this to yourself." Walker sighed and pulled out a pair of handcuffs. "Samit, you're under arrest." The entire room fell silent as he stepped forward and snapped the cuffs around her wrists. Karen lost it. "You can't do this! This is a mistake! I'll sue all of you!" she howled, thrashing as the officers dragged her toward the exit, but no one came to her defense. As the police hauled her crazy ass out the door, I turned back to Ted. "So," I said, grinning, "I assume this means the HOA won't be bothering me anymore?" He let out a long sigh. "Yeah, man, we're done here." And just like that, Karen's reign of terror was officially over. The next morning, I woke up, stepped outside, and took in the peaceful silence of my farm. No tow trucks, no HOA threats, no screeching Karen, just pure, uninterrupted peace. It had taken a ridiculous amount of effort to get to this point, but in the end, justice had been served. Karen was facing legal trouble for fraud and trespassing. The HOA had been left scrambling to fix their mess. And best of all, no one would ever dare to mess with my land again. A few days later, I got one last piece of satisfaction. A news article about Karen's downfall. Turns out, her antics had gone viral in the local community. The HOA had officially expelled her. She was being sued left and right, and her reputation completely destroyed. And me, I got exactly what I wanted from the start. A quiet life, a farm to take care of, and the satisfaction of knowing that Karen would never forget the day she messed with the wrong guy. But hey, I have to admit, part of me almost misses the chaos. Almost. And that's how Karen completely ruined her life trying to mess with my farm. What do you guys think? Have you ever dealt with a crazy neighbor or an entitled HOA? Let me know in the comments. And if you like this story, don't forget to subscribe for more insane HOA and entitled people stories. See you in the next one.